Listen, most people think debt is just about the numbers on paper. But what if I told you that the real prison isn't the money you owe? It's the economic illusions keeping you trapped. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the fundamental economic principles that freed me from catastrophic debt and transformed how I understood wealth creation itself. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll discover why everything you've been told about paying off debt is actually keeping you broke. And the counterintuitive strategy that wealthy people use to turn liabilities into leverage. So before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because I want you to know that financial freedom isn't reserved for the lucky few. It's a choice available to anyone willing to challenge conventional wisdom and embrace economic reality. Here's what nobody tells you about the psychology of debt and why your mind is your greatest asset. You know what? When I found myself staring at $800,000 in debt back in the 1950s, and let me tell you, that was an astronomical sum in those days, equivalent to millions in today's dollars, the crushing weight wasn't just financial, it was psychological. Every morning I'd wake up and feel this invisible hand pressing down on my chest, this suffocating sense that I'd failed, that I was trapped, that no matter how hard I worked, I could never climb out of this hole. And here's the painful question I know many of you are asking right now. How do I even begin when the mountain is so impossibly high that I can't even see the top? Let me share something with you that changed everything for me. Something they don't teach in schools. Something that goes against every instinct you have when you're drowning in debt. The first breakthrough I had wasn't about money at all. It was about understanding human action and economic incentives. See, I realized that debt isn't your real problem. Your real problem is how you think about resources, productivity, and value creation. Most people, when they're in debt, they immediately go into survival mode. They cut everything, they scrimp, they sacrifice, they live in constant deprivation. And you know what happens? They stay poor. Not just financially poor, but spiritually poor, mentally poor, creatively poor. I discovered something revolutionary during my darkest financial moment. Something that flew in the face of everything my parents taught me about debt. Something that the banking system doesn't want you to understand. Debt is simply borrowed future productivity. That's it. When you owe $800,000, what you really owe is not dollars. You owe value creation. You owe productivity. You owe innovation and economic output that hasn't happened yet. And the moment I understood this, everything changed, because suddenly the question wasn't, how do I pay this off? The question became, how do I increase my economic productivity so dramatically that this debt becomes irrelevant? Let me paint you a picture of what was happening in my mind during those sleepless nights in 1954. I was teaching at the University of Chicago, making a professor's modest salary, and I had taken on this massive debt to invest in research, in education, in building something meaningful. But the conventional wisdom, pay it off slowly, make minimum payments, live on rice and beans, that path would have taken me 30 years. 30 years of poverty, of restriction, of playing defense. And here's what I want you to understand. Every single day you spend in defensive mode, focused on reduction rather than expansion, you're losing opportunities. You're losing the compound effect of growth. You're losing the chance to leverage your most valuable asset, your mind. So I made a radical decision. Instead of focusing on paying off the debt, I focused on multiplying my income. I took on consulting work. I wrote papers that commanded speaking fees. I developed intellectual property that generated royalty streams. I collaborated with businesses that needed economic analysis. And here's the counterintuitive part that blows people's minds. While I was doing all this, I wasn't making minimum payments on my debt. I was investing in myself. I was investing in research, in tools, in relationships, in skills that would 10 times my earning capacity. Because I understood that in a free market economy, the person who creates the most value captures the most value, period. Within 3 years, my annual income had increased by 600%. Not because I was lucky, not because I had special connections, but because I understood that your earning potential is directly proportional to the value you create in the marketplace. And when you create exponentially more value, the debt that seemed impossible becomes manageable, then easy, then irrelevant. By 1959, that $800,000 was paid off completely, not through deprivation, but through multiplication, not through sacrifice, but through strategic value creation. And that experience shaped my entire economic philosophy for the next 50 years. The fundamental economic principles that transform debt from prison to leverage. Now, let me take you deeper into the economic mechanics of how this actually works, because this is where most people get lost in emotional reactions instead of rational analysis. And I need you to really hear this, because this section is going to challenge everything you believe about money. Here's the painful question I hear constantly. But Milton, what if I'm not an economist? What if I don't have special skills? What if I'm just an ordinary person with ordinary abilities? And my response is always the same. That question itself reveals the fundamental misunderstanding that keeps you trapped. Let me explain something about how free markets actually work. In 1956, when I was in the thick of my debt payoff journey, I started studying the behavior of people who successfully navigated financial crises. And what I discovered was fascinating. The people who paid off massive debts quickly weren't necessarily smarter, more educated, or more talented. They simply understood three fundamental economic principles that most people never learn. First principle, money flows toward value creation. Second principle, your time is your most scarce resource. Third principle, debt is only a problem when it exceeds your capacity for value production. Let's break this down in practical terms. When you owe money, you're not in a financial problem, you're in a productivity problem. The bank doesn't care about your feelings, your struggles, or your intentions. The bank cares about cash flow. They want to know, can you produce enough economic value to generate the cash to repay them? That's it. So the solution isn't to focus on the debt. The solution is to focus on dramatically increasing your economic productivity. And here's where it gets exciting. In a free market, there is virtually unlimited demand for value creation. I'll give you a real example from my own life. In 1957, I was approached by a business organization that needed help understanding inflation and monetary policy. They offered me $5,000 for a weekend consultation. That's about $50,000 in today's money. Now, the conventional wisdom would say, take that $5,000 and immediately pay down your debt. But I did something different. I took $3,000 of that money and invested it in hiring a research assistant and upgrading my office capabilities, which allowed me to take on 3 more consulting projects within the next 60 days. That $3,000 investment generated $18,000 in additional income. You see the difference? Instead of reducing the debt by $5,000, I increased my capacity by $18,000. This is what I call the multiplication mindset versus the subtraction mindset. Most people in debt are subtracting. They're cutting expenses, reducing lifestyle, eliminating opportunities. And yes, there's a place for fiscal responsibility. I'm not suggesting reckless spending. But what I am saying is this. If you spend all your energy and resources on subtraction, you never build the capacity for multiplication. And multiplication is how you actually eliminate debt permanently, not just pay off one particular balance. Here's another principle that changed my life. The velocity of money matters more than the amount of money. When I had $100 in my pocket, I could use it once and get $100 of value. Or I could use it strategically to generate $100 of value 10 times in a month. That's $1,000 of economic impact from the same $100. This is what wealthy people understand that broke people don't. They don't just accumulate money. They circulate money through value-creating activities. Every dollar you control should be working, producing, generating, multiplying. If your money is sitting idle, even in a savings account, it's not helping you escape debt. It's actually losing value to inflation. Now let me address the practical concern that I know is running through your mind right now. But Milton, I have bills to pay today. I can't just invest everything in future productivity. And you're absolutely right. This is where strategic thinking comes in. When I was managing my debt, I operated on what I called the October 20th, 1970 rule. 70% of my income went to essential living expenses and minimum debt payments. I never defaulted. I never missed payments. I maintained my credibility. 20% went into immediate income multiplying investments, skills, tools, relationships, opportunities. 10% went into long-term wealth building. This balance allowed me to maintain stability while building explosive growth capacity. And here's what happened over time as my income multiplied. That 70% for essentials stayed relatively flat. I didn't inflate my lifestyle, but now it represented a smaller percentage of a much larger pie. The 20% investment bucket grew dramatically in absolute terms, which accelerated my income growth even faster. The 10% wealth building became substantial. Within 5 years, I had completely reversed the equation. Instead of 70% going to survival and debt, only 30% went to fixed obligations, and I had massive capacity for investment, growth, and wealth building. This is the power of understanding economic principles instead of just reacting emotionally to financial pressure. The complete roadmap, how to implement these principles starting today and transform your financial reality. All right, now we're getting to the practical implementation, the exact steps you need to take starting today to transform your relationship with debt and build unstoppable economic momentum. And I want to address the biggest question head on, Milton. What if I've tried everything and nothing works? What if I'm just not capable of this kind of transformation? And here's what I want you to understand. That question assumes your current state is your permanent state. But human beings are the most adaptable, innovative, creative creatures on earth. Your current financial situation is simply the result of your current economic behaviors and beliefs. Change the behaviors and beliefs, and the situation must change. It's economic law. Let me give you the specific roadmap I used and that I've seen work for countless others over my 50 years of studying economic behavior. Step one, and this is absolutely critical, you must conduct what I call an economic audit of your life. For 1 full month, you're going to track every single dollar that comes in, every single dollar that goes out. But here's the key. You're not just tracking amounts. You're tracking value creation versus value consumption. Every expense, you ask, is this creating future value or consuming present value? Rent, creating value because it gives you stability to work. Entertainment subscriptions, consuming value. Professional development, creating value. Impulse purchases, consuming value. At the end of the month, you'll have a clear picture of your economic behavior patterns. Step two, identify your highest value activities. This was revolutionary for me in 1958. I realized that when I was teaching undergraduate courses, I was earning X per hour. When I was doing research, I was earning 3 times per hour in terms of future opportunities. When I was consulting, I was earning 10 times per hour. When I was writing books, I was earning 50 times per hour in terms of long-term royalties and speaking opportunities. So the obvious strategy was to maximize the high-value activities and delegate or eliminate the low-value activities. I hired graduate students to help with basic teaching duties. I eliminated committee work that didn't serve my goals. I ruthlessly protected my time for activities that multiplied my economic value, and my income exploded. Step 3, build what I call value creation systems. This is where most people completely miss the opportunity. They think in terms of trading time for money. You work an hour, you get paid for an hour. But that's the slowest possible path out of debt. Instead, you need to create systems that generate value independent of your direct time investment. For me, this was writing books. I'd spend 6 months writing a book, but that book would generate income for decades. I'd develop a course curriculum once, but teach it to thousands of students over the years. I'd create intellectual frameworks that businesses would license and implement. These systems meant that my income was no longer capped by my available hours. It was limited only by the reach and impact of my ideas. Now, here's where it gets practical for you. Regardless of your profession, If you're in sales, your value creation system might be building a referral network that generates leads automatically. If you're in services, it might be creating training materials that allow you to charge premium rates for faster results. If you're an employee, it might be developing specialized skills that make you indispensable and command higher compensation. The principle is universal. Move from direct time for money exchange to leverage-based value creation. This is how you 10 times your income without 10 timesing your hours. Step 4, strategic debt management through opportunity cost analysis. Here's something I did in 1959 that shocked everyone around me. I had the cash to pay off the remaining $200,000 of my debt, completely eliminated. But when I ran the numbers, I realized that the interest rate on my debt was 6%, while the return I could generate by investing that cash in expanding my consulting practice was conservatively 25%. So I kept the debt. I made the regular payments, but I deployed that $200,000 into income-generating assets. Within 18 months, the returns from those investments had not only covered the interest on the debt, but generated enough additional cash flow to pay off the principal and still have surplus. This is counterintuitive, but it's economically rational. Step 5, build an advisory team. When I was in the depths of debt, I was arrogant enough to think I could figure everything out myself. But in 1956, I made a decision that accelerated everything. I assembled a small team of advisors, an accountant who understood tax strategy, a lawyer who understood contracts and negotiations, a successful entrepreneur who'd built multiple businesses. These people weren't employees. They were advisors I'd meet with quarterly. And the insights they provided were worth millions. They helped me see opportunities I was blind to. They helped me avoid mistakes that would have cost me years. They held me accountable to my own goals. If you don't have advisors yet, start with one. Find someone who's achieved what you want to achieve and offer them value in exchange for their wisdom. Now, let me bring this all together with the ultimate principle that governs everything. Personal responsibility and economic freedom are inseparable. When I finally paid off that debt in 1959, the celebration lasted about 5 minutes. You know why? Because I realized the debt was never the real issue. The real issue was building a life of economic self-determination, where I was creating value, serving others, and building wealth as a natural byproduct of meaningful work. The debt was just a symptom of earlier decisions and circumstances, but the solution, the capacity I built to create massive value in the marketplace, that solution became the foundation for decades of prosperity. Here's what I need you to understand as we close. Your debt is temporary, but your economic capacity is permanent. The skills you build, the relationships you forge, the systems you create, the value you learn to generate, nobody can take those away from you. Even if you paid off all your debt tomorrow and then lost everything in a crisis, if you've built real economic capacity, you can rebuild quickly. This is why I always focused on capacity building over balance reduction. The balance will take care of itself when your capacity is strong enough. So here's your action plan starting today, right now, this moment. First, write down your total debt number and your current monthly income. Don't be afraid of the numbers. They're just information. Second, identify the 3 highest value activities you could do that would most dramatically increase your income. Third, block out time in your calendar this week to begin executing on those high value activities. Fourth, find one person who's successfully navigated debt and ask them to coffee or a phone call. Learn from their experience. Fifth, commit to the October 20th, 1970 rule for the next 90 days and track your results religiously. Listen to me carefully. The pain you feel right now about your debt is temporary. The pride you'll feel when you conquer it through intelligent economic action is permanent. You have everything you need to transform your financial reality. You have a mind capable of creating value. You live in a free market that rewards value creation, and you now have the fundamental principles that govern economic success. The question isn't whether you can do this. The question is, will you? I'm telling you from personal experience, 50 years of studying economics, experiencing financial crisis, building wealth, and teaching these principles. You are capable of far more than you currently imagine. That debt that seems insurmountable, it's nothing compared to your capacity for value creation. Those limitations you feel, they're not real barriers. They're just the edges of your current comfort zone. I want you to make a decision right now, today, in this moment. You will not be a victim of your debt. You will be the architect of your economic future. You will apply these principles with discipline and persistence. And 1 year from today, you'll look back at this moment as the turning point. Go out there and create massive value. Serve others through your unique talents and skills. Build systems that multiply your impact. And watch as your income grows, your debt shrinks, and your confidence soars. The economic principles don't lie. They work for anyone willing to implement them with consistency and intelligence. Your financial freedom isn't a distant dream. It's an inevitable outcome of right economic action. Now go make it happen, and I'll see you at the top.